It was a typical Friday night, and I was crashing at my best friend Jake's house after a long day of hanging out, playing video games, and just chilling like we always did since we were kids. Jake's mom, Mrs. Thompson, was one of those cool parents who let us stay up late as long as we kept the noise down, and she always made sure we had plenty of snacks. That night, Jake had fallen asleep early on the couch downstairs while we were watching some old action movie, so I headed up to the guest room around 10 p.m., figuring I'd get some rest before we continued our marathon the next day. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet you only get in the suburbs where everyone turns in early, and I was scrolling through my phone in bed, winding down with some memes and messages from other friends. Everything felt normal, nothing out of the ordinary, until suddenly, around 11 p.m., there was a soft but insistent knock on the guest room door. At first, I thought maybe it was Jake waking up and coming to grab something, or perhaps he needed to tell me about a funny dream or whatever. But when I sat up and said, "Come in," the door creaked open slowly, and there stood Mrs. Thompson in her robe, looking a bit hesitant but determined. She was in her early 40s, always put together even late at night, with that warm smile that made everyone feel at home. But this time her expression was different, more serious, almost troubled. She closed the door behind her gently and walked over to the side of the bed, sitting down on the edge as if she had something heavy on her mind that she couldn't hold in any longer. I was confused, rubbing my eyes and asking if everything was okay, if Jake was all right, or if something had happened downstairs. She took a deep breath, her hands fidgeting in her lap, and then she looked me straight in the eyes and started talking in a low voice, making sure not to wake anyone else in the house. What she said next completely shocked me, something I never expected from her, something that turned my world upside down in an instant. Mrs. Thompson began by apologizing for coming in so late, saying she couldn't sleep and had been debating whether to talk to me or not for hours, but she felt like she had no one else to confide in about this particular issue. I assured her it was fine, that I wasn't really asleep yet anyway, and asked what was bothering her so much that she needed to knock on my door at this hour. She hesitated again, glancing towards the door as if checking that Jake or her husband wasn't nearby, and then she leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. She told me that over the past few months she'd been noticing things about me, little details that made her realize she had developed feelings that she knew were inappropriate given our ages and my friendship with her son. I sat there frozen, my heart starting to race, thinking maybe I had misheard or that this was some kind of joke. But her face was dead serious, flushed with embarrassment, but also with a strange resolve. She explained how it started innocently enough, seeing me grow up from the awkward kid who used to come over for playdates to the young man I was now, confident and kind, always helping around the house without being asked. She said that every time I stayed over, she found herself thinking about me more and more, imagining scenarios that she knew she shouldn't, and it was driving her crazy, keeping her up at night just like this. The words tumbled out as if she'd been rehearsing them in her head for weeks, and I could see the relief mixed with fear in her eyes as she confessed this secret crush, this forbidden attraction that had built up inside her. I didn't know what to say at first, my mind reeling from the revelation, wondering if this was real or if I was dreaming the whole thing. She reached out and touched my hand lightly, saying she didn't expect anything from me, that she just needed to get it off her chest because bottling it up was making her feel guilty and restless. That touch sent a jolt through me, and suddenly the room felt smaller, the air thicker as I processed what she was admitting. After her confession hung in the air for what felt like an eternity, I finally managed to stammer out a question, asking why she was telling me this now, in the middle of the night, risking everything. Mrs. Thompson sighed deeply, explaining that her marriage had been struggling for years, that her husband was distant and they barely connected anymore, leaving her feeling lonely and undesired in her own home. She said seeing me around, full of life and energy, reminded her of what it felt like to be wanted, to feel that spark again, and it had awakened something in her that she thought was long gone. She wasn't looking to ruin anything, especially not my friendship with Jake, but she couldn't pretend anymore, couldn't keep stealing glances or finding excuses to be near me when I visited. I listened intently, my initial shock giving way to a mix of sympathy and something else I couldn't quite name. A curiosity, perhaps, or flattery that someone like her, mature and beautiful, could see me that way. She went on to describe specific moments that had fueled her feelings, like the time I helped fix the leaky faucet in the kitchen and got a bit sweaty, or when we all went to the beach last summer and she saw me in swim trunks, appreciating how I'd filled out over the years. Her words were detailed, almost poetic in their vulnerability, painting a picture of internal turmoil that she had been battling alone. I shifted uncomfortably under the covers, aware of how close she was sitting, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the dim light from the hallway. She apologized again, saying she knew it was wrong and that I probably thought she was crazy, but confessing it aloud was the only way she could hope to move past it, or at least understand her own emotions better. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with unspoken possibilities, and I found myself searching for the right response, not wanting to hurt her, but also grappling with my own unexpected reactions to her proximity and honesty. As the conversation deepened, Mrs. Thompson opened up even more, sharing how society expects women her age to just accept fading into the background, to focus on family and forget about passion, but she wasn't ready for that yet. She felt alive when thinking about me, and that scared her as much as it excited her. I nodded, trying to be supportive, telling her that I understood feeling stuck or unfulfilled, even though at my age I hadn't experienced marriage or long-term routines like hers. She smiled faintly at that, appreciating my attempt to relate, and then she asked me point blank if I had ever thought about her in that way, if there was even a sliver of reciprocation in my mind. My face burned hot and I hesitated, not wanting to lie, but also not ready to admit the fleeting thoughts I'd had myself over the years, harmless crushes that every guy gets on a friend's attractive mom. But in that moment, with her looking at me so intently, I confessed that, yeah, sometimes I had noticed her, how she took care of herself and had that confident aura that was hard to ignore. Her eyes lit up slightly at my admission, and she leaned in a bit more, her hand still resting near mine on the bed. We talked about the age difference, how it was significant but not insurmountable in private fantasies, and she laughed softly when I joked about how Jake would absolutely lose it if he knew about this conversation. The mood lightened a little, but the underlying tension remained, a magnetic pull that made it hard to look away from her. She described dreams she'd had, vivid ones where we were together in ways that made her wake up breathless, and hearing her say it out loud was both thrilling and overwhelming. I felt a rush of adrenaline, my pulse quickening, as the boundaries we'd always maintained started to blur in this late-night confessional. Eventually, the talk shifted to what this meant going forward, with Mrs. Thompson saying she didn't want to make things awkward, that we could pretend this never happened if that's what I preferred. But there was a hopeful undertone in her voice, a subtle invitation to explore whatever this was, at least in words for now. I admitted that I was flattered beyond belief, that no one had ever opened up to me like this before, and it made me see her in a new light, not just as Jake's mom, but as a woman with desires and needs. She thanked me for listening without judgment, for not freaking out and storming out of the room, and then she stood up slowly, as if reluctant to end the moment. Before leaving, she bent down and gave me a quick hug, her body pressing against mine for just a second longer than a normal friendly embrace, whispering that she felt better already having shared her secrets. The door clicked shut behind her, and I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing a million miles an hour. Sleep was impossible now. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed her words, her touch, the vulnerability in her voice. It was a revelation that changed everything I thought I knew about our dynamic, turning innocent sleepovers into something loaded with possibility. I tossed and turned, wondering if she was doing the same in her room down the hall, if this confession was the start of something or just a one-time unloading of emotions. The next morning came too soon, with Jake banging on the door to wake me up for breakfast, acting like nothing had happened, because for him, nothing had. Mrs. Thompson was in the kitchen, making pancakes as usual, smiling brightly when I walked in. But there was a knowing glance exchanged between us, a secret spark that made my stomach flip. We played it cool all day, chatting normally about school and plans. But underneath it all was this new layer of awareness. Every time she brushed past me or handed me something, I felt that electricity again, and I caught her looking at me when she thought I wasn't noticing. Jake remained oblivious, focused on beating me at the next game, and I was grateful for that distraction because my thoughts kept drifting back to the night before. What she said had indeed kept me awake all night, dissecting every word, every implication, wondering if I should address it again or let it simmer. Days turned into weeks, and the sleepovers continued, but now each one carried anticipation. Mrs. Thompson found subtle ways to communicate, like leaving notes in my bag or texting me innocently about picking up Jake, but with hidden meanings only we understood. One night, she knocked again at 11 p.m., this time bolder, slipping into the room and sitting closer, her hand on my leg as she admitted the feelings hadn't faded. If anything, they'd grown stronger. We talked for hours, boundaries testing themselves as confessions led to light touches, then to a kiss that sealed the secret between us. It was passionate, forbidden, and utterly consuming, explaining why that first revelation kept me awake. It was the beginning of an affair that would change our lives. The guilt was immense at first, betraying Jake's trust, but the connection with her was undeniable. A mix of emotional depth and physical chemistry that I'd never experienced. We were careful, meeting in secret moments, always aware of the risks. She said things like how I made her feel young again, desired in a way her husband hadn't in years, and those words fueled late nights of reflection long after she left the room. Over time, the knocks at 11 p.m. became our signal, a ritual that built tension throughout the day. Each encounter delved deeper into her confessions, sharing fantasies, regrets, hopes, making me feel seen and mature beyond my years. That initial shock evolved into addiction, the reason sleep evaded me not from fear but from excitement and overthinking every detail. Jake started noticing I seemed distracted sometimes, asking if everything was okay, and I'd brush it off, the lie adding to the complexity. Mrs. Thompson and I discussed ending it multiple times, but the pull was too strong. Her words from that first night echoing as the catalyst that unlocked this hidden world. One particularly intense night, after another late knock, she revealed how scared she was of losing control, but also how alive it made her feel. We explored further, crossing lines that kept me staring at the dark ceiling afterward, heart pounding, mind swirling with implications. The secrecy heightened everything. Stolen glances at family dinners, brief touches under the table. Her original confession was the spark, but now it was a flame, consuming thoughts and preventing rest as I pondered the future. Eventually, doubts crept in. What if Jake found out? What if this destroyed everything? We had serious talks during those midnight visits, weighing the joy against the potential devastation. Yet we continued, the attraction too potent. She shared stories from her youth, parallels to our situation, making me feel less alone in the confusion. Months passed, the routine of knocks and confessions becoming part of my life at their house. Sleep was rare after those nights, always replaying her words, her touch. One night, she knocked and said we needed to stop, that it was getting too risky. Tears were shed, but the resolve was temporary. The feelings persisted. We tried distance, but it only intensified the longing. Another knock weeks later restarted it all. Reflecting back, that first 11 p.m. knock and her shocking words were the turning point, the thing that kept me awake not just that night, but many thereafter, lost in the whirlwind of emotion. The affair brought highs and lows, moments of pure bliss contrasted with anxiety, all stemming from her brave confession. In the end, it shaped me profoundly, teaching about desire, secrecy, and consequences. All because one night, my friend's mom knocked and said something that altered everything forever.